We've become disconnected from understanding our relationship to nature. This idea that we are a part of nature, not apart from nature. We are nature, much like a bee or a flower is a part of nature.
Can you tell us about what the philosophy of harmony is? Now, this is something that has been practiced by cultures and peoples around the world for millennia, but it's not something that was ever really brought to the forefront, I would say, especially in Western politics or Western society.
So really, at its most fundamental level, this idea of harmony is how do we reimagine, re-understand our relationship with nature and the relationship between the built form, the natural form, and humanity. If we think about ourselves as a part of nature, that informs how we learn, how we teach, how we practice in whatever discipline that we're in. And I think it also binds us together as part of this ecosystem and not as individuals acting on our own.
We had the opportunity to go to Windsor Castle, which was my first time there, and we got to see the premiere of the King's new film called Finding Harmony, A King's Vision.
What is both inspiring, but I think also hopeful about harmony is that it shows that there is a way to actually create change. It's not just about talking.
Hello, and welcome back to the Inspire Action Podcast. I'm Ciara, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Simon Sadinsky, Professor, Executive Director of Education, and in-house Harmony Advisor at the King's Foundation. So what does this mean? Well, in today's episode, we're going to be deep diving into harmony, a philosophy that has guided cultures and peoples for millennia, but is just now making its way into Western thought via a few key changemakers. So here it is, my conversation with Dr. Simon Sadinsky. Hello, Dr. Simon.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Inspire Action Podcast.
It's a pleasure. Really happy to be here.
Good. We are so happy to have you. I wanted to preface this by saying that we first learned about your work through the King's Foundation, of which Ben and I are 35 under 35 members. And we, to be honest, had never really heard of the King's Foundation before, prior to our joining it. And in the last year or even 6 months of our involvement, we've learned so much about the philosophy of harmony, which is what I want to talk to you about today. But before we jump into that, I want to know more about you. Can you give us a little bit about your background, kind of how you got here, what you're involved in, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the accent probably gave it away, but I'm originally from the east coast of the US. I've been over in the UK since about 2010. I guess in some ways my own journey kind of exemplifies why harmony has interested me so much in that. You know, I'm a little bit of a perpetual student, shall we say. So I did an undergrad in the US, in Colorado, at this little liberal arts college called Colorado College in political science, which is a really interesting small university in that it has a very different model of learning. And without going into much detail, what it means is that it's quite interdisciplinary. You get a lot of exposure, the ability to learn in different geographies and different subjects. And so I think from early on was shaped by this real interest in this idea of interdisciplinarity and the importance of this interdisciplinary learning and practice. I initially thought I wanted to go down the route into politics, but ended up moving to Chicago after graduating and working in community development and urban policy for a short time, which became a real passion of mine. So I ended up doing a master's degree in urban planning and policy, with a sort of dual focus on community development and international development, which was brilliant, but still didn't totally feel like it ticked that box. So of what I was trying to understand, of our place in the world. And so I ended up moving to the UK, studying at the London School of Economics in a master's in population and development, which was sort of an intersection between social policy, demography, and international development, which was fascinating. And after that, in London, spent a short period of time working for an international development organization, and then for a sort of national community development organization before starting my journey with what was then the Prince's Foundation about 13 years ago. And then over that period, spent about 7 years or so on a sort of very, very personal evenings and weekends PhD in urban studies. But my interest and my focus really has always been on this idea that what is place? And how do we understand both our place within our communities, but also how we form and shape those communities? And this idea that doing so requires a more holistic approach. And so when I started working for the then Prince's Foundation 13 years ago, one of the first things I did was pick up the book Harmony, which the then Prince of Wales wrote in 2010, And it just resonated with me. It was that idea of all of these things I've experienced, I've learned, I've studied, I've worked, and seeing and feeling the threads between these things, I think was really captured in that idea of harmony in that relationship.
Interesting. Can you tell us about what the philosophy of harmony is? Now, this is something that has been practiced by cultures and peoples around the world for millennia, but it's not something that was ever really brought to the forefront, I would say, especially in Western politics or Western society.
Definitely. I think it really boils down to, it's what His Majesty sort of refers to, I think, as sort of this crisis of perception, which is this idea that, as you say, is in the history of things a more recent phenomena, but this idea that we've become disconnected from understanding our relationship to nature, this idea that we are a part of nature, not apart from nature. We are nature, much like a bee or a flower is a part of nature. And so really, at its most fundamental level, this idea of harmony is how do we reimagine, re-understand our relationship with nature and the relationship between the built form, the natural form, and humanity. And so really where harmony, I suppose, comes in is this idea that it's not just about a philosophy. It is about rethinking our relationship, but it's also something deeply grounded in practice. If we think about ourselves as a part of nature, that informs how we learn, how we teach, how we practice in whatever discipline that we're in. And I think it also binds us together as part of this ecosystem, and not as individuals acting on our own.
Absolutely. No, I think that's something that in our work we were understanding that from very early on, but we didn't really have the terminology for that. I've always felt very connected to nature, but our societies, and as you look at them, you know, in macrocosm, are not. And so to hear this articulated really it was like an aha moment for me when I first understood this through the lens of the King's Foundation. Like, oh yes, okay, this is it. And so can you speak a bit about what that concept of harmony means for the planet and for people? Like, how do we apply that? How can we better integrate ourselves into this harmony philosophy or work within this harmony philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, I think really at a fundamental level, it's about this idea that we need to create mechanisms for knowledge exchange, for shared learning, and for collaborative action. And, you know, so I think if you look at an area like, for argument's sake, let's say sustainable textiles, and I listened to a recent podcast, which was brilliant, that was looking on that idea of fast fashion. And you look at that as being, you know, one of the world's largest global polluters, but tackling that challenge, you know, you can't have a conversation about sustainable textiles without having a conversation about regenerative agriculture and food security, without having a conversation about how we build and design our towns and our cities and manage that intersection between our natural and our built form, without thinking about how we're building local economic development, without all of these sort of conversations that I think too often happen in their own little disciplinary silos. And so I think what harmony really teaches us is that much like within nature, we're part of an ecosystem, and a balanced ecosystem, an ecosystem in which there are relationships between everything. We need to find a way of establishing better relationships between not only ourselves and nature, but ourselves, and how we are working together, learning together, and practicing together.
Absolutely. So is that primarily what resonated with you most when you read the Harmony book? Is that kind of what really drew you in and kind of connected all the dots between all of your studies?
It was. And I think I came to it originally from this real interest in our built environment and in how places are created and shaped. And this just sense that tackling the challenges that we face and just community development in the broadest sense of the term requires a more integrated, a more holistic, a more people-centered approach. But it was really through then exploring, well, actually, some of those fundamental lessons are taught to us by nature. Nature is one of the greatest teachers in these areas. That really is what inspired me, I suppose, and continues to inspire me about this concept of harmony, that by listening to and learning from nature's systems, it informs every aspect of how we live our lives, including how we create the places that we live. So I think when I think about, you know, harmony, it's such a broad term. You know, in so many ways we think of it as this very intuitive thing, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about it in music, or we talk about it in all these other areas.
Right.
But I think what is both inspiring, but I think also hopeful about harmony, is that it shows that there is a way to actually create change. It's not just about talking. It's not just about, and I think what's beautiful about the 35 under 35, which you mentioned, which you're a part of, is that it's this unbelievable collection of people, unbelievably talented people from a diversity of walks of life, different trades, different practices, different backgrounds, but actually bring them in a room together. And there is the knowledge there to create huge systemic change, not only in the areas that you're working and they're working,
right,
but actually more broadly around how we think about what a more sustainable future for people and for planet actually looks like.
It has those ripple effects.
It has those ripple effects. And
Absolutely.
I think that's, we talk, I think we talk a lot about, if the one thing that I think His Majesty is really, has been brilliant at is this sense of convening and this idea of the importance of bringing people together who can go on and create that change. And we'll talk about the work of the King's Foundation, but the idea of places like Dumfries House, which are our headquarters, are that they are these sort of living laboratories, these places where we can put into practice what this looks like, but then also use that to create an evidence base for how this can be done, how others can do this, and then bring those who can create that change to then disseminate that change. So we are sort of the hub from which the spokes of change come, or that sort of initial drop in the ocean.
The first
that causes
dominoes pushed down. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
No, that's really interesting. So, like I mentioned, we're part of the King's Foundation, and the King's Foundation is a really fascinating organization, and I really don't want this to sound like I'm a mouthpiece for the organization or anything, but this is something that I was really inspired by through learning, is seeing the way that harmony is not just the mission statement and it ends at that. The way it goes into every aspect of the King's Foundation's work. Can you actually speak to, you just mentioned Dumfries House. Can you explain a bit first about what the King's Foundation does, what its goals are, and then how Dumfries House, like you said, ties into that?
Definitely. So I think the King's Foundation is a sort of diverse organization that focuses on sort of sustainable community development in the broadest sense of the term, but it sort of bridges, I suppose, both education and practice. We sort of use this sort of somewhat cliched term of sort of this circle of learn, practice, teach, and how you can kind of create and stimulate that. And so our work bridges across a huge range of disciplines and a huge range of interest areas, and it is everything from regenerative agriculture and food systems to architecture and urban design to traditional craft and construction and traditional arts and textiles and engineering and hospitality and all of these areas, but really boiling down to this fundamental belief that all of those things are interconnected, right? If you take a helicopter view, that there are these threads that bind all of those things together. And so I think where the King's Foundation comes in and really shines is this: it takes this idea of harmony and it showcases what that means, how it works. And it does so through places like our headquarters at Dumfries House. But it also does so in projects in collaboration with local partners around the world where we create systems of knowledge exchange, right? A lot of these challenges are not things that stop at the border. They require collaboration, they require partnership, and they require sort of systemic collaboration.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a really beautiful sort of synergy in the King's Foundation's work in that it's very much about local impact. If you were to come to a place like Dumfries House, which is in Scotland, it's in Ayrshire, it's in a relatively deprived part of the UK. It's an area that was historically heavily reliant on the mining industry. And when that industry collapsed, it had a pretty profound impact on the local community.
Generational impact.
Generational impact, and on economic outcomes, on educational outcomes, on health outcomes. And so Dumfries House is this remarkable place, which is this lovely 2,000-acre estate. It is this beautiful heritage asset. It has this incredible collection of Chippendale furniture, but it had to be so much more than just a historic property. It had to be what we would sort of call a driver for heritage-led regeneration. How could this heritage asset create that systemic change in the community? And it is first and foremost a community project. It's something that was done, I suppose, not only really even just for the community, but of the community. And so it's a place where we train 10,000 students a year across all these areas. It has a community health and well-being facility. It has all these amazing community projects to combat loneliness and isolation amongst the elderly. It has all of these component parts. And of course, it's still a tourist destination. It's bringing economic development to the local area. But it's also having a huge impact on local outcomes in education, in well-being, and in other areas. But at the same time, what I think is both challenging and exciting about it is it's also a place where we can put into practice this concept of harmony and show that it works, and show that it is equally as applicable in a city, as it is in a rural community in the UK, as it is in international projects, which the film, I think, captured beautifully as well. So it's this real sense that the work of the King's Foundation is both grounded in the local and the local impact, but also having a much bigger conversation about how we can reshape the way we practice to create a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. And that's because also Dumfries House, when it was first purchased, if I'm not mistaken, was kind of in disrepair, correct? So it had to be not only rebuilt, but also restored, and using those practices and those ideas of regeneration and restoration from the ground up. And it was, like you said, for the community, but also by the community as well.
Yeah, no, very much. So I think it has historically been a private home, and as I had this incredible collection, and it was being sold, and the collection of furniture was going to auction, and actually quite literally some of the furniture sort of tagged and on trucks and ready to go. And when the then Prince of Wales sort of stepped in, I think a lot of it originally was around this saving this asset for the nation, as it were. But I think it really quickly became apparent that it had to be and needed to be so much more than that. And I think it took an incredible vision to see that, but also the last 15 plus years have been this incredible journey of what does the community need? How can we be a vibrant part of that community, but how can we also use that to inform the wider things that the foundation 35 years ago last year we've been trying to achieve over that period of time. So how does it become that exemplar project? How does it become that living laboratory?
Yeah.
And it's also just a really wonderful place.
Yeah. And a big part of what you mentioned also is the importance of heritage and craft. And I truly, before learning more about the King's Foundation, I had never really thought about heritage crafts, to be honest. And it wasn't something that I really understood the importance of. It's beautiful when you go into an old cathedral and you see stained glass windows and you see beautiful stonework and beautiful woodwork, but you don't think about how we pass on those skills. And do you want to speak a little bit about the programs that the King's Foundation not only funds but also runs, and for anyone, basically open to the public to learn these heritage crafts? Definitely.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how we teach a lot in traditional skills, and that can be in more of the traditional arts or the decorative or applied arts, or it can be in construction or textiles and a range of others. And I can talk a little bit about how we run those, but I think it sort of comes from the starting place of that. Actually, these traditions, this knowledge, these experiences have a huge amount to teach us, and they have a huge amount of contemporary relevance, right? We're not just teaching these traditional skills for the sake of tradition, and we're teaching them because we need this knowledge and we need these skills to create a more sustainable future. And so if you look at the building crafts programs we run, for example, so incredible programs that are training so that next generation of master craftsperson within the construction industry and within heritage skills in particular, it's of course about our 6+ million pre-1919 or traditional buildings, all of which require really specialist skills and experience and materials. And, I think there's something like a third of craftspeople near retirement age. There's something like 2/3 not actively passing on their knowledge and skills. So there's this looming skills crisis about how we address this. And there are also real challenges within our educational systems about how we tackle that, because a lot of these are really specialist trades. They're not, tens of thousands of people graduating a year in these areas, but they're vitally, vitally important.
Yeah.
But they're all important not just to preserve our historic fabric, but also as we think about, what does sustainable new construction look like? And actually, these skills, these methods, these materials have a huge amount to teach us about what sustainability looks like as we build into the future. So it's this real sense that these skills are not just about looking backwards. They're very much about looking forwards.
Absolutely. And what I think is great as well, because with these skills, there's often a big privilege gap as well. These are not skills that are readily accessible to, I would say, most people, not only just within the UK, but around the world. And what you mentioned about learning from the past to inform the future is so true, because we often say some of the most sustainable tools or methods are things that our grandparents did, or we learn to do more with less.
Yeah.
And I think that is how also sometimes the quality has been able to maintain. I mean, when you see these gorgeous buildings from the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries that are still standing and still so beautiful, it's really a testament to not only the human touch, but the skill that's required to make that not only beautiful, but last as well.
Absolutely. And I think a huge part of that is about celebrating those skills.
Yeah.
I think too often, they're seen as almost in some ways secondary options. And I think that actually the amount of talent and dedication and creativity and value of these programs and of these skills is immeasurable. And it's immeasurable to our everyday lives. These are not just sort of these theoretical things. Oh, isn't that nice? You know, beautiful stone carving. But actually, these are fundamental parts of how we create our places and how we do so sustainably.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's why, with the King's Foundation and with some of our programs, and I think speaking more personally, I think one of the things that has been, I think, really important is to have someone like the King who's can serve almost as an ambassador for these things. And I think, if you're entering, whether it's hospitality, whether it's construction, whether it's the textiles industry, whether it's some of those, it can be a tough ride at times, and particularly as you're starting out. Yeah. And I think to have someone who has such influence be able to say, these things matter, this is important, and to speak so from a real sense of knowledge. I mean, these are not things that are just talked about. These are things that are felt as deeply important. And I think, certainly from our experience and of our training programs, I think there is this real sense that idea of celebrating craftsmanship, of celebrating these areas, is so fundamentally important. And with another sort of hat, and I'm a trustee of this amazing organization called Heritage Crafts, who publish something called the Red List, and it's this list of endangered crafts, and that's growing, unfortunately. Despite best efforts to do so. And so I think, there is this real risk, and I think without organizations like the King's Foundation and others who are trying to not just shine a light on the importance of this, but make training in these areas accessible, there is a real risk that we face, that we lose these skills and these traditions, and
absolutely,
we won't know what we're missing until it's gone. Right?
No, exactly, always.
And it's, there's this, I think, really poignant moment in the Harmony film and things talked about in the book, and Harmony, and I think more broadly in some of our conversations, but this idea of, it's not just about climate change, but things like biodiversity loss and others. So we're actually losing our ability to solve the challenges we face on a daily basis. And I think the preservation of knowledge and skills is very much a part of that same conversation.
Absolutely. Especially, I know globally as well, art funding for arts education is being cut increasingly year by year, especially in the US where we're both from. Yeah. And so that's something that is absolutely vital now more than ever, because we don't, like you said, we don't know what we're missing till it's gone.
We don't. And we have a tendency to sort of specialize early and often, as it were, right? So I think a big part of this and a big part of what we try to do is create almost learning pathways. So, we teach from age 4 to 74, right? We do from primary school to PhD.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize it was from that young to that old.
Yeah,
as well.
So in all those areas. And so whether it's in primary school where we're dealing with giving people exposure or secondary school where it's about actually, let's do meaningful engagement with industry to actually understand what these careers are like. Let's do, not just a job fair, let's actually meaningfully co-create, co-design with industry. What are their needs? What are learners' needs? How can we bring those needs together to create meaningful pathways into these employment areas? Or whether it's those who've been through college or university and are looking to take that step towards mastery in those areas. I think there's this real sense within that we need to find ways to make those programs not just encouraged, but also accessible. And so if you were to look at, we run a lovely program at a place called Trinity Bow Wharf in London, which is a diploma year in the fine and applied arts. And the beauty of that program takes, give or take 60 students a year. A lot of it's scholarship driven. And it's for students who are likely to go to art school or architecture school or fashion school or wherever. But they may come in thinking, well, I want to go to art school, but actually never having had exposure to a wider range of trades and disciplines and areas because of lack of access in their education systems or whatever it may be. And so this program does this beautiful job of actually saying, let's meaningfully engage with all these different disciplines. Let's find your space, and then let's support you along that journey to move into that space. And I think it's similar with some of our craft training programs, which whether those are our partnerships with Chanel or whether it's our building craft programs, there's this sense of A, those programs are free. B, we pay all the students on those programs a monthly bursary of £1,500 a month or so, depending on the program. So there are no financial obstacles to participation.
That's so important alone, because I think also if you look at any art or any kind of usual area of study, whether you want to become an actor or you want to be a painter, usually I would say on average, the average person feels like they can't study that because they can't make a living while they're studying that. And then that's so sad because someone who might have an extraordinary passion or talent cannot access that. So that's incredible.
And I think a lot of people maybe feel like it's not a pathway for financial reasons or, because it's not seen, they should go to university. There are typical pathways that they should
Right,
follow,
yeah.
or whatever it may be. And I'm thinking one of our alumni who's now this unbelievable stone carver. She's, beyond brilliant. But I think she started her career as, I think, a clinical psychologist in the prison system. Right?
Oh, wow.
And then, it wasn't until she was older that she sort of realized, actually, I want to work with my hands. I've
Yeah.
always wanted to do this.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
never felt I could, and retrained in those areas. And so I think enabling people to pursue their passions in those areas, not just sort of emotionally, this is something important, this is something you can do, but then actually providing opportunities for them to do it,
Right.
is vital.
Absolutely. I love what you mentioned about working with your hands, because so many studies have shown that working with your hands does wonders for your mental and even physical health as well. And when Ben and I had the opportunity to visit Highgrove House a few months ago, where there's several of the programs operate out of there, we got to make a brooch with some of the women who had trained with like Chanel couturiers on how to I'm not even going to use the right word, hand embroider, these incredible brooches. And they gave us all these different little bits to kind of try and do it ourselves. And we were all or Ben and I at least, were terrible at it, but it was such a soothing practice, and it was such an incredible, and it also just gives you so much more appreciation for things that we take for granted. Imagine, a jacket that's completely covered in rhinestones or in beads, like someone had to hand do that. So it's a really wonderful, and I think that also contributes to finding harmony within yourself, connecting you to a craft, connecting you to the greater world, maybe connecting you with a community of other people who also do these things. Definitely. So I thought that was really brilliant. Like, and we went home with that. We were so proud. We still have them. We're very proud of them.
The talent is incredible. But I do think, it is amazing. You go in there and see what they're doing. It is this incredibly mindful thing. And we have a health and wellbeing center at Dumfries House, and we've run programs that are focused on craft there, because there is this real sense that actually doing and making and losing yourself in that can be really powerful, much like being in nature can be hugely powerful.
Absolutely.
The programs and things like the programs at like the Chanel program, I think, are a really wonderful example where those students are learning unbelievable skills, and they're on an incredible program where they're learning from these remarkable artisans through Chanel and through their ateliers. But also, one of the reasons why we feel so strongly about partnership and collaboration is that, as much as that's having an incredible impact on the individuals, through partnering with Chanel or other partners, depending on the program, we can also reach those wider audiences because of that shared kind of convening ability, and that sense that, actually, going back to that celebrating idea, that you need to reach those audiences who might not otherwise be engaging, and often through engaging with partners like Chanel or like others, you can really shine a light on the value of this and of the importance of this. So it is that lovely balance between individual impact and sort of wider change that you can make.
Absolutely. So from that, I want to move on now to this past Wednesday. We had the opportunity to go to Windsor Castle, which was my first time there. I'd never been there. Beautiful, beautiful estate. And we got to see the premiere of the King's new film called Finding Harmony, A King's Vision, which I was really completely honest reaction right now. I was really blown away by it. And I mentioned this to some of the King's Foundation team afterwards, that personally, I always felt that a lot of His Majesty's work has been overshadowed throughout his life by a number of circumstances. And I never really knew what he spent his life doing. And so being able to see that film and seeing not only personally around his own home and within the King's Foundation program, but also beyond the incredible work that the King's Foundation does abroad, and just kind of how His Majesty's own passion for it as well. Could you speak to that a little bit, and about his involvement? Because, of course, the royal family are patrons of so many charities, and they do such incredible work in so many different fields. But what about the King's Foundation in particular is His Majesty, or keeps His Majesty so actively involved? Yeah,
I think what the film captures beautifully is this idea that this is, in many ways, a very personal project. This is something in the broader harmony philosophy and what was born out of that 35 years ago as the King's Foundation. I think it is this journey that he himself had been on from when he was younger and was surrounded by the natural world, was seeing what was happening, the devastation of our farmland, the way we changed, and our food systems, the way we we're dealing with our forests and managing all of these areas and our cities and our built environment. And this sense that this doesn't feel right. And it brought this, I think, in many ways, personal journey around, well, hey, why doesn't this feel right? But also, what is the solution for that? And so I think the film does that really well of showcasing that this is a personal journey and that it has been a mission. This hasn't just been something that he's sort of been on the periphery of. This is something he's been leading on in so many ways for so long. And whether that is through that convening ability, whether that is through projects like Dumfries House, whether that is through inspiring some of those international projects that are showcased in the film, it's that what we really need to do is showcase that although we face it is a time-sensitive issue, there are things that we can do, but we need to demonstrate that they are things that we can do in order to create that wider change. And so I think what the film, the way it tracks in the film of this idea of there must be something that we can do. We've lost this connection with nature that we used to have, and many of our indigenous communities still have. But in many parts of our society, we've just seen that we can dominate nature. We're not a part of nature. We can, use nature, bend nature to our will, as it were. Right. And inherently knowing that's not right, that just feels wrong. And history has taught us that it probably is wrong. And I think having been at the forefront of those conversations for so long, there was this real sense of, well, I need to demonstrate that there is another way. And I think that's where the work of the King's Foundation and of some of the other work that was captured within the film really comes through, which is helping to create that evidence base for a more harmony approach to doing things.
Absolutely. And one scene that really stuck out, I don't want to spoil the whole film because I really do urge people to watch it. The scene that really stood out to me was when His Majesty convened various elders from different indigenous groups and tribes around the world. So many from South America, many from Africa, many from Asia as well. It seemed to be a really wonderful collective where he stood there and he listened to the needs of the elders, the concerns of the elders, and just was one with them. There was no hierarchy there, which was really refreshing to see and really nice to see. And to see also Indigenous concerns and knowledge and ancient wisdom being brought to the forefront of the conversation as well, because that's so rarely or historically rarely done. That was really, really nice to see, and see it being taken into account not only for the King's own personal knowledge or understanding of the world, but also to be applied in other places as well.
It was, I have to say, it was one of the most remarkable moments of my life as well, being a part of that summit, the sort of Harmony Summit. And it was incredible, not just because it brought these Indigenous elders from all around the world, but it provided, and speaking personally, what I found unbelievable about it was that even across the geographic and cultural and historical divides between these communities, that when they came together, what bound them in many ways was this understanding of their place in the natural world. And that created this sense of unity that was remarkable to see. And I think it was also, so the event itself was this chance to not just sort of recognize and celebrate that, but also to learn from it, and not in an extractive way, but actually say, how can we take this unbelievable insight and understanding of our relationship with the natural world, and how can we embed that within our practice, whether that is the way we approach our food systems, whether that is the way in which we build our towns and our cities, whether that is the way we approach our own individual place within our world, that there's so much that we can learn, but we need to create the mechanisms to do so. And we need to learn from those who still retain that knowledge. So no, it was a spectacular
I thought that was
moment.
a really beautiful, almost beginning of closing a circle as well, with the impacts of colonialism on Indigenous cultures for so long, and then being able to take a leader of a monarchy in England and to be able to actually listen to them and hear their stories and their wisdom and understanding. That was really incredible for me to see. I was like, wow, that's I think that's putting some good karma out into the world. And also, isn't it kind of remarkable that we look at this unity and this connection between all these indigenous groups as a deep understanding and appreciation for nature, as it's almost a shame that we have to look at it as remarkable, because we should all have that connection.
Yeah.
But we don't, but we are trying to go back to it. And I know that there are so many people in the world that actively want to go back to it and are working to restore our connection to and our interconnectedness to this planet and to nature. And not, like you said earlier, not asserting our dominance, but rather being part of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think that's exactly right, and I think that again speaks to the importance of the idea of convening. It's not just about the convenings around these incredibly high and impactful high-level summits and things like that, but actually, let's get the practitioners, let's get the knowledge holders, let's get those who are on the ground doing this work in these areas, and let's not just only learn from them, but let's actually use that convening to create mechanisms for them to collaborate, for them to create change, for us to build these exemplar projects that show it can be possible. So it's not just about talking about it. It's not just about celebrating it. It's about, well, let's do it. If we're learning these things, if we understand these things intuitively, but if it's not embedding itself into practice, well, then let's embed it into practice.
Exactly.
Right?
If it's not there, let's do it. Let's build it.
Yeah. And I think that is, bringing it back to harmony. I think that is the beauty of harmony for me, which is that, harmony resonated with me personally as a philosophy. It continues. It is something I believe really deeply in, and but I also think that as much as it is a philosophy, the beauty of it is that it drives people towards action, but it does so in a way that builds a community around it.
No.
I think this can be hugely daunting, and we teach, as I say, we teach nearly 16,000 students a year, many of whom are concerned about the future, but also worried about how they address that. And I think there is this real sense of fear, which at times can lead to almost an apathy of, I don't know how to address these things. And I think alone, it is really difficult to address those things. So part of that call to action is you're not alone.
No.
There's a community around this, and there's a community in the areas you're working. If you're in sustainable textiles, there are others working in that space. But you know what? Actually, here are some people who are doing some fascinating things in agriculture that would directly relate to the materials you're working with.
Your work. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And and so I think there is that real almost sense of excitement that comes with that, of like, well, we could do some really interesting things if we work together on this.
It's not so much a rhetoric. There's so much rhetoric and propaganda around despair and fear and intimidation. Whereas when you look at the concept of harmony in its simplicity, it leads people to action through inspiration, through aspiration, through just wanting to be better, not only personally, but do things for others and the planet that are better as well, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
So, so it's like I said, it's very simple. Very simple. It's almost like, why should we be talking about it? It's such a simple thing, but in our world, it's also revolutionary, which is incredible.
It is. I think it's really, I think when that happens, it is a really beautiful thing to see. And, one of the joys of my job, of which there are many, but is that the building. There's this really wonderful part in the film, and again, I don't want to ruin the film, so I would encourage everyone to go see it. But there's this really beautiful part in this film where one of the people who is showcasing their work internationally sort of is talking about an intervention he made, which then had this ripple effect that led to all these other things. And he sort of has this great line where he sort of says, we didn't do X, Y, and Z, but we're happy to take the credit for it, right? That's great. But what's lovely about that is that idea that actually, just as you said earlier, that first domino, right? If you get that change going through having some of these conversations, that what can come as a result of that can be really profound. And we one of our initiatives is a research center at the University of Oxford that we collaborate with Kellogg College on, which is the Global Center on Healthcare and Urbanization. And it was, again, this really interesting example of there's some amazing work happening within health and within public health. And there's this incredible work happening around sustainable urban development. But let's bring together the experts in all those disparate areas and actually just create a better understanding of that intersection between place creation and health and well-being. And out of that came this remarkable commission and report, but this toolkit, but also these really interesting projects that just brought together people doing really interesting work, but who hadn't collaborated, and brought them together to collaborate. And the outcomes have been tremendous. And so I think it is one of the joys of it is just seeing the impact that those in the 35 under 35, the fellows, those people who are engaging in practice in this area can have through working together.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we begin to wrap up, for anyone listening, because I think, like I said, when I found out about this, I thought this was incredible. And I'm sure there are going to be so many people listening who are in the same boat, who might think, I've always wanted to pursue that, or I didn't even know about this, and I'd be interested in learning more about how I could pursue that. Can you share a little bit about how anyone listening could potentially get involved or apply for these programs, or a bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, please do go and watch Finding Harmony, A King's Vision. It is a wonderful film.
It will be available on Prime on, I believe, the 6th of February.
6th of February, exactly that. And has been an incredible project, I think, is an incredible representation of harmony. But I think for those who are interested in learning more, we do have, and the King's Foundation has some incredible programs across a diversity of areas that I would encourage people to look up and join us on. For those who are able, coming to visit Highgrove or coming to visit Dumfries House and see some of this in person. There are these really wonderful ecosystems, these really wonderful places, not just to visit and engage in the natural world. But I would also say, just on a more fundamental level, I think there is a huge amount of value in rethinking our relationship with nature. And that starts with a very personal journey. And so I guess I would encourage everyone to maybe just think about harmony and think about what it means for them, think about what it means for their area of practice, and then, explore others who are interested in working and engaging in that space.
Incredible. And for maybe anyone who is constrained geographically or economically, are there any kind of virtual or digital programs or ways that people can engage a bit with this?
Yes. So we have a lot of education that can be delivered and is delivered online. So, for example, through our School for Traditional Arts, we have these really incredible programs which explore some of the things that are captured in the film, but around some of these principles of sacred geometry and some of these underlying sort of the mathematics of nature that underpin so much of our work that you can do online. A lot of our educational programming, if you're a teacher or if you're a student, that we teach at Dumfries House or at other locations can be accessed. And we also have centres around the world where we work, so well worth a look into.
Incredible. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Simon. Is there any final thought you had or final note you want to leave people with?
Watch the film. Watch the film, visit our website.
It's the King's, can you give us the website?
Kings-foundation.org.
Kings-foundation.org.
And is well worth a look through. We've got some great social media channels as well. And I think hopefully, as I say, just have a think about how this could inform your own life and your own practice, and reach out to us if we can be of help.
Incredible. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today, Simon.
Thank you. It's been a joy.